I just did not know what to do. Nobody was listening to me. Nobody was listening to my son. Thankfully, and it's awful to say this, but a governor saw my son being beaten up by the bully. So I went from feeling very alone and useless as a parent, because I couldn't just wave a magic wand and stop this, being bullied to the point where a child wants to end their lives, or they're self-harming, or they develop an eating disorder. That's not kids being kids.
No.
That's trauma. That's deep-rooted trauma.
What were you bullied about? What was the reason?
It was everything. She said I have big eyes, so that started it off. And then because my parents were divorced, that started it off. My stepfather was abusive, so I grew up in a domestic violence household.
Welcome, Linda, to the Warrior Academy podcast.
Thank you. Thank you.
So great to have you here.
And it's great to be here.
I've read about your work and seen your stuff, and it looks absolutely fascinating. I think you're doing some incredible work, very impactful work with young people around bullying. So I'm excited to ask you lots of questions about what you're up to and to share your work with our audience here in Dubai and in the UK as well. So Linda, tell me a little bit about yourself and what it is you do.
Well, I'm the mum of 3 sons, and I worked in a school for many years and then began training to be a counsellor. When my younger son, who was then 10 at the time, was bullied at school. Unfortunately, there wasn't much support around at the time. And it was because of a flip comment from him. I wanted him to seek help and support, and he didn't want to speak to anybody face to face. He just wouldn't do it. And then computers had then started to come in, and he said, is there any online support? And I couldn't find any for people who were affected by bullying behaviour. And I said to him one evening, you go to bed, I'll keep looking. And he stopped at the door and said, Mum, you're studying all of this. Just set it up yourself. And the rest, as they say, is history.
Wow.
And I got thinking. I went into work the next day, spoke to a colleague, and she said, well, when you do, I'm in. And I said, what do you mean when I do, I'm in? Why don't you do it? And she said, no, I'm in. And I just investigated further, spoke to a friend of mine who was a web designer and said, can we set up an online forum where people and parents who are affected by bullying behaviour can receive some help and support? And that was all I wanted to do. And he went off and investigated, come back and said, yes. And so I invested my savings and, spoke around, found some obviously trained people. We just didn't pluck people out of thin air, and set up the online forum where they could receive help and information. But of course, that was backed up by a website with a lot more help and information and downloads. And when it launched, it actually crashed within an hour because so many people were trying to access it. Yeah.
Wow. It gives you that immediate insight into how needed it really was, right? If that many parents.
It did. And it worried me as well. It worried me because I knew that, I was bullied at school myself, and I ended up with an eating disorder because of it. And that lasted till I was well into my 30s, because these things don't just stop when you leave school, and it got me thinking, oh my goodness me, this is a much, much bigger issue than I actually realised, and we need to do more.
Yeah.
This forum is not going to be enough. And then over time, we worked on training programs and workshops and downloads and brochures and activities until this is where we are today, with everything that we have.
2006, you started the Bullies Out program almost 20 years ago, right?
18 years in May we are. Yeah.
Wow. So congratulations on that. And I mean, I'm just trying to get a snapshot now of where you're at. How many schools have you worked with? How many trainers have you worked with? How many children's lives have you impacted?
Oh my goodness. We work with around 135, 140 schools a year. Um, we work in businesses because we have a workplace program as well.
Yeah.
Last year, we worked with just under 20,000.
20,000 children mentored through bullying every year.
Yeah, and some parents, but mainly children and young people we work with.
Yeah.
So, we probably worked with about 300 parents, I think 500 in the workplace, and the rest are children and young people.
Amazing.
And, we aim to increase year upon year how many we work with.
Yeah.
That's our aim.
How many staff do you now have working with this on this with you?
We have 2 paid employees.
Okay.
But we do have a team of 3 amazing freelance trainers as well. And we have a wonderful team of volunteers. So the freelance trainers are the ones that are delivering the work in schools and in the workplace as well. And then we have our schools program manager, and she also delivers work. But of course, she works with me then to keep creating and developing and making sure that we keep on top of all the different things, because bullying just keeps evolving. Yeah. There's always something really, different.
Really, Bullies Out it's like a social enterprise. It's part charity funded with volunteers and donations, and part commercial with selling courses to workplace environment.
Yes, yeah, we sell to the workplace. With schools, we apply for funding, or we are supported by a couple of local councils as well. Sometimes we do have to charge if the funding won't reach their area. Sometimes a Welsh funder will fund Wales schools, but it won't fund English schools.
Yeah.
An English funder won't fund Welsh schools. There's politics, there's dynamics, isn't there? So, we have to be very careful there. But we also do a lot of our own fundraising as well. Okay. And so the costs, if they're not free, they're very heavily subsidised as well, so that we can keep them as low as possible to ensure that a school can afford them. But with the workplace, they can afford them. So, of course, there's, they pay for them.
Brilliant. And I'd love to, before we talk about your insights around how you've helped so many children through bullying, I'd like to touch on what it was like as a mum watching your children go through bullying. Because that puts you in a unique position to really understand what children go through. And often I find, looking after other parents and helping them through it. I've got 2 kids. They're very young, 3 and 6. They haven't been through bullying. Of course, I've been through bullying for about 4 years, and I've mentored thousands of children through bullying. But as a parent, I think it's one of the most terrifying experiences of your life. Mm-hmm. These young little things that you're meant to be protecting, and ultimately they've got to go out there and they've got to face difficult transitions like bullying on their own. You can't.
That's right.
And you can't protect them all their life. So, tell me about your experience as a parent, mentoring children through bullying.
It was, I think I felt really alone. I didn't, it's not something that you can put a stick in plaster over, is it, and kiss it better. And he was just, his behavior was changing. His schoolwork was suffering. He was a very, very bright boy, and I was being called into the school. He was becoming quite disruptive. And I said, and he did out of school different things as well, where he was all right there. And I said that there's something going on in this school and you're not listening to me. They weren't listening to me. And I said, I know it's bullying. I've been there. I know it's bullying. No, there's no bullying in my schools. We still hear this today. And thankfully, very few schools say that, but we have still heard it. And I said, yeah, yes, he is. And I just felt, I just did not know what to do. Nobody was listening to me. Nobody was listening to my son. And in the end, thankfully, and it's awful to say this, but a governor saw my son being beaten up by the bully.
Yeah.
And I think if it wasn't for her seeing that, they still wouldn't have believed me. And she sort of said, right, that's it. We're going to deal with this. And even then the head was just, no, it's probably just, boys being boys. Oh, and that really drives me, kids being kids, it drives me insane. And I said, listen to me, because they even sent my son to an educational psychologist, and blamed him and said, we think he's on the spectrum. What? What's that all about? He's being bullied and he's being disruptive. And even if he was on the spectrum, he doesn't deserve that. Nobody deserves it. And
this was their reaction to finding out.
This was their reaction. Yeah, we're not taking the blame. It must be your child's fault that he's being bullied because he's kicking off now, so he's different. Oh, right, okay. So it's all right to go bully everybody that we deem as different, is it?
Mm.
And he just looked at me and so I went from feeling very alone and useless as a parent because I couldn't just wave a magic wand and stop this, to then, right, this is not happening anymore. You are not doing this to my child, to I'm taking him out of your school. Yeah. He's not coming back. I didn't know what I was going to do, but he wasn't going. And then my son suffered a huge panic attack. He stopped breathing. He was raced to hospital and he's laying in a hospital bed. And he said, if this is my life, I'm not staying. And he was 10.
Oh, 10.
And that was it.
When you were telling this story, I imagined him sort of 14, 15, 16.
No, he was 10. And we know that young people have taken their own lives because of bullying. Mm. And, I lost my oldest son 2 years ago. So I understand what a parent feels like when they lose a child. But it's just, you listen to that coming out of their mouths and then you think, that's it. I slept when he came home, I slept by his bedside, I slept on his bed. I didn't want to leave him because I was so afraid that he would try and do something. And I went back into the school and said, I'm not bringing him back in here until you deal with it. And the governor was very supportive, and my son made a decision. There wasn't much left before he was due to finish that school, but I also made a decision not to send him to the feeder school where the child who was displaying the behaviour was actually going. And my son said, no, Mum, I'm going back. He said, I can't stay home. He said, because then they've won. And he did go back and they did stop it and they did bring the other parents in who knew absolutely nothing about what was going on. So they were failing two children. They were allowing this child to continue displaying this behaviour. There were issues at home and that's not an excuse, but we've still got to deal with that child displaying the behaviour, and they were failing my son. And he went off to a secondary school, a different secondary school. Very, very nervous, because all his friends went to the other school. But he did very well there, and then, went off to college, university. He's 30 this year, and he's doing brilliantly, and he's now an addiction coach, working with people who have an addiction. Yeah, he was a software developer, but he changed his,
Amazing to look back, he looked back at his life and realized what, him going through that sparked this energy in you to create something which has then gone on to help thousands, tens of thousands of kids. That would be an amazing legacy for him to understand and look back on. I think that's something he'll be incredibly proud of. How you reacted. I thought what you said about how you felt as a parent was really relatable. I think that a lot of parents feel a huge sense of guilt.
You do,
even shame, and this feeling of being lost, like they've tried everything. And I often think that, there isn't a lot of support for parents. When a child goes through bullying, it's not just the child that goes through it, it's the whole family. And
Absolutely.
just as you talked about there, that fear hit you, and then it was just like everything had to change from that point on, and it did.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we see it time and time again. The first thing that happens when a child goes through bullying is this breakdown of communication.
That's right.
He didn't tell you he was going through bullying. You didn't tell the teachers he was going through bullying. You can have the best relationship in the world with your kids, but they might not tell you they're going through bullying. And it can be really difficult to spot. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
you do feel guilty. You really do feel guilty because you're the parent. But this whole, it's kids being kids. No, it isn't. Kids being kids are coming home with brand new scuffed shoes. No, holes in the knees of their trousers.
Yeah.
A lost blazer, a broken bag. That's kids being kids. We've all done that. I remember my mother, you've had those shoes 5 minutes and, look at the state of them, rant. That's kids being kids. But, being bullied to the point where a child wants to end their lives or they're self-harming or they develop an eating disorder, that's not kids being kids.
No.
That's trauma. That's deep-rooted trauma that we have to deal with. And, we all have to work together, parents, schools, organisations like us, mental health organisations. We have to deal with this and work together to, A, support the person that's going through it, and B, even though some people have disagreed with me, we still have to support the child displaying the behaviour because we have to stop them. We have to stop that behaviour.
Often it's the children doing the bullying that need the most support, I would say. It's bullies aren't bad people. And this is something I've written about in the book, Not a Victim. They're not bad people. They're typically trying to regain some control in their lives, whether that's on their environment, on their own self-esteem or whatever it is, right? They've often gone through bullying themselves. They could be in an abusive home or have an abusive brother or sister, or maybe there's a teacher that's abusive to them, or they've gone through something in their lives that's planted this seed of negativity and they're trying to regain control. And that's been my experience of helping children through bullying. But when I think about your son, I'm asking myself, why was he bullied? Did you ever find out? What was the reason?
He was and still is a person that likes his own company. I still can't believe the school called me in for this as well. He doesn't like reading. He's never liked reading comics and fiction books and things like that. My older son was exactly the same. It had to be real. It had to be real facts and history and things like that. And so he was bullied for being a weirdo because he just what, he has what they call a coalition in the bones of his feet. So, he can walk, he can do this, he can do that, he goes to the gym. But he couldn't play rugby or football because he couldn't run fast enough to do that.
Right.
And so it's all little things like that just, culminated into this big thing that he was weird.
All it takes is for one reason for you to be different, right?
Absolutely.
One reason. And, if you don't own or love that specific trait that makes you different about yourself, then you become a target, right?
Yeah.
And so you become vulnerable because you don't own or love that trait about yourself. You then become vulnerable. I use the example if you're really tall, but you love that about yourself because it makes you great at basketball, and then someone at school teases you for being tall, you probably wouldn't care much. It's like if the teasing is going against your own self-belief of how that's actually a high value trait, then you're not actually that upset by it. But what we see so often is this level of vulnerability that children experience because they haven't got to that stability with their emotions over certain things that do make them different, right?
Yeah, exactly. And he's 6'5", so he towered over everybody in school. So that was something else that they picked on him for. And he
Well,
didn't
I mean,
like
it could
being
be
tall.
seen as a threat, right? So you imagine
Yeah, exactly.
6'5" now, so he was probably at 10 years old, quite tall compared to his peers. So
He was, yeah.
to know that
And
he was
thankfully, he loves his height. He's great, he's proud of being tall now.
yeah,
He walks tall, as they say, and he's very proud of who he is, and what he does, and who he helps.
yeah,
And because he's a porn addiction coach, so he helps people who are addicted to porn. Because he's never drank, he doesn't. So he's never had that lived experience as such. But when he was doing his training, it was one thing that kept coming back all the time, that there was no support when he did his research for people who were addicted to porn. There was lots of people addicted to alcohol, drugs, and gambling, but not this. And that's the route he chose. So yeah, he's
it's interesting. He would work with young people as well.
Yeah.
But then I imagine, growing up with you as a mum and looking at the work you've done, that no doubt inspired him to want to go down that route. Right?
Yes, yeah. I've tried to sort of explain to him that he needs to develop a package for schools, because of so many young people, and what they access on the internet today is very, very scary, and they shouldn't be accessing
very little support for young people when it comes to learning about online and how dangerous it can be, and their reputation online, all this sort of stuff, right?
Just make them aware of that it's not all, good on the internet, and to stay away from it as long as they can.
Yeah, absolutely. Interesting as well what you said about schools claiming they're a bully-free school. This is also one of the triggers for me, because I really believe that it's impossible to eradicate bullying. As much as we
absolutely
love the idea of living in this world without negativity.
Yeah.
There's a few reasons why that's impossible, right? The first reason is that for bullying to not occur in the first place, you've got to prevent a young person from going through any negative experience that might force them to want to regain control in their lives, which is impossible, because that basically means we're eradicating any negative experience, because bullying is a symptom of what they're going through in the first place. That's the first thing. Obviously, it's impossible to stop in that regard. And the other thing is for a child to understand in that process of, I've gone through something negative and the symptom of this is that I'm now bullying someone. For them to understand that, they need to have a high level of emotional intelligence and self-awareness, and maybe have even done some introspective work. You're not going to get that in a child under the age of 10 to 15 years old. It's very unlikely for them to pick up on that, especially the majority of young people. So for me, it's a fallacy to believe that we can live in a world without bullying. Can we live in a world with less bullying? Definitely, we can do.
Absolutely, yes.
We can develop emotional awareness. We can develop methods for spotting bullying, and we can develop awareness of how these difficult social interactions go on. Yeah. And then we can equip young people with tools that make them more resilient and transition through bullying faster and raise their self-esteem. And maybe even give them responsibility in finding out who around them is going through bullying and trying to put an end to it themselves as a collective peer group. But we certainly can't remove it. And one of the things I see in Dubai, which is all private schools, is you sometimes see the old school saying we're a bully-free school. There's only two reasons they would say that. They're trying to make sales by encouraging parents, or they're just completely unaware of how bullying works. From me as a parent looking at that, that's two red flags either way, right?
That's right. And that's what we say to schools. Look, I think when we first started, if a school said, oh, no, we don't need you, we don't have bullying, we'd say, oh, okay. And then after a couple of years, like, listen, yes, you do. Yes, you do. And you're either not listening to your pupils, you're not paying any attention, you're brushing it under the carpet, which means you're not supporting these young people that are trying to talk to you, or you're walking around with your eyes closed. Because trust me, it happens in every school and probably most workplaces as well. It happens in the community. Bullying behaviour happens. So let's sit down and we'll talk about this, and we'll talk about how we can help you. And we don't go into a school and say, you are a school that has bullying. We want to go in and we want to talk to the children And there's only one, we have 15 workshops and only one of them has bullying in the name, and that is online bullying. That's the only one. The rest of them are all about positive friendships, respectful relationships. We challenge attitudes and behaviors. And it's all about, recognizing behaviors in themselves and in others and what to do about it. We do it through activities and discussions and video and involving them and trying to empower them to just really make that community a better place to be. And that we work with teachers as well to help them, because a lot of teachers know that it happens, but if their senior management team won't support them, then the teachers are just as worked up as the children because there's no support. So it's about working with that school from the top down to make it a much more positive, kinder place to be. And that's what we try and do. So, we don't, when they say, oh, there isn't any bullying, like, okay, we try not to roll our eyes, okay, because that's not a good behaviour either. But yeah, okay, let's have a chat about this and how we can still work with your school, and what we can do to, support your pupils, empower your pupils, and your staff as well. And that is our aim. That's what we want to do.
Is that one of the key obstacles you face? Schools saying they don't experience bullying in their school. That's the first
not
key obstacle.
very many. Not very many. Thankfully, not many. We've had a few, but not
what are the
many.
biggest obstacles in your?
For a lot of schools, it could be finances, and that's why we work really hard to fundraise to raise the money, because funding's really tough to come about. There's a lot of charities out there doing amazing work, and you're all going after the same pot of money, which, when a charity says that they have a few million to give away, that might sound a lot, but not when you've got thousands of charities all going for that pot. And so, funding can be a big one for some schools. So we fundraise to keep our costs as low as possible. And like I said earlier, we work with a couple of councils who do fund us to work in their area as well, which really, really helps everyone. Brilliant. It helps us, it helps the schools, and of course, it's brilliant for the councils as well.
Bullying's got this ability to make or break a child's character.
Absolutely.
A child can go through bullying and it can transform their life so that they live a shell of a version of themselves. Or they can overcome bullying with huge amounts of courage and they transform their character as a result.
Yes.
And so in the book, Not a Victim, I've interviewed lots of people, incredibly successful people, sports people, business people, and so on, who attest a portion of the success they've experienced to the bullying they went through as kids. And it's fascinating because by going through something so traumatic, as a parent, we want to avoid our child doing that. But the reality in the real world is that when a child goes through that, if they're mentored in the right way and they overcome it on their own, they turn into the sort of person who is more resilient, who has this strong sense of justice, who, has high levels of self-esteem, is more confident. And I find that people with those traits, they're more likely to go on and succeed in life. And in some way, it's kind of reassuring parents to know that my child might go through bullying, but if I can just mentor them through it, I'm going to create a stronger version of them that's going to go on and do great things, not despite, but because of the bullying.
Yes. We've got to get them through it. We have to just get them through it. We have to let them know that there is a light at the end of that tunnel, and we will get them through that tunnel. We will get them to that light.
Yeah.
And, there's, when I hear of a child that has taken their own lives, it just absolutely breaks me, because, you just think, oh my goodness me, because most of the time they haven't told a parent, they haven't told anybody.
Yeah.
We know that with anybody that takes their own lives, it's just such a shock that nobody is gone the next. But I also understand why so many don't talk about it, because it took a long time for my son to do that. And when I was bullied, I didn't tell. It was, in fact, my father, he passed away nearly 4 years ago, and my dad didn't know. My parents divorced when I was young. My dad didn't know I was bullied at school until he came to live with me 4 years ago.
Yeah.
I didn't tell him. My mum did. My mum knew because of the eating disorder and everything. Mm-hmm. But because my dad didn't live with us, and because of his job, I did see him regularly. But, I wore great big baggy clothes. And back then, men are a lot more in tune today than they were back in that day. My dad probably wouldn't have noticed that I was getting thinner and thinner. Mm-hmm. He'd have probably thought it was a fad, or I was wearing massively baggy clothes because it was fashion,
How old were you when you were experiencing bullying?
It started when I went to high school, and it lasted right the way through high school. Right, all the way. Sorry?
What were you bullied about? What was the reason?
Oh, do you know what? It was everything. She said I had big eyes, so that started it off. And then because my parents were divorced, that started it off. My stepfather was abusive, so I grew up in a domestic violence household, which was awful, and rendered my mum really powerless. I watched my mum go from a very strong, determined woman to nothing, beaten badly, with no strength to get out. And that was hard because my mum was a strong, beautiful woman with an amazing job, and she went to nothing because he just beat it all out of her. And so, she picked on me because of that. She picked on me because my family on my dad's side we're very diverse. So I had an aunt on my mum's side, actually, and an uncle on my dad's side. And I know it was all very hush-hush years and years and years ago. I'm in my 60s now, so we're talking a long time ago. And they were gay, but it was kept very quiet. But because this girl, particular girl that bullied me, her mum was friends with my mum. So, of course, they talk, don't they? And then, this girl had obviously overheard. But I also had cousins as well who were, so I had an uncle who was from Pakistan. I had uncles who were from Jamaica. Well, that was the norm to me. This was a normal family to me. My mum said that my family was the family of the future, and they are. It was, and it is the family of the future. But back then, it wasn't. So she bullied me because of that. My cousins, though, who were, had white mums and Pakistan and Jamaican dads, weren't bullied. But she bullied me for having a weird family. What was that all about? I didn't have a weird family. I had uncles that could tell me stories from other countries. She didn't. But no. She bullied me. She made my life hell for 5 years. And then with what was going on at home, because that's another thing we don't know, what is going on in a person's home. We don't know that. They could come to school all bright and breezy. We don't know what they've left behind.
No.
And then somebody's picking on them, and you're just wearing them down and down and down and down and down. And that's what she did to me, because, there weren't many people that knew what was going on in my home life. A couple of close friends that I'm still friendly with today. And she just wore me down. And so for me, I stopped eating. That's what it was for me.
It's often a response to stress.
Yeah.
That eating is in one or two ways. It can be comfort eating too much, or not eating at all. And
I've gone between the two throughout the years, because I was hospitalized a couple of times, and I was well into my 30s before I'd had my children, my older children then, and I just thought, I can't do this anymore. I could be inadvertently killing myself. My body could just give up on me,
Yeah.
and I've got children. I need to sort of think of them. And I did, and I got to grips. But during that time, I went from anorexic, then I went bulimic when they were helping me get over it for a while, and you eat, and then I just ate too much, and I just swung between the two. And as a result of it now, my body, it's not the best. I have terrible bone conditions. I've had 3 major surgeries on my joints. They're fake joints, as my granddaughters say. Nanny's got fake joints, and I have to take lots of medication each day to help with them. And I've got to be careful with my spine because I've sneezed and it's fractured because it's so weak. But it's a result of, I did a lot of high impact exercise when I was anorexic, and I ran. I was a runner as well. And when you're not fueling your body with the right food, and you're doing this high impact exercise, and back then we didn't have great trainers to protect you either, your body's going to retaliate, and mine is now. But, I do now what I'm supposed to do, what the doctors tell me to do, and I look after myself as best as I possibly can, to make sure that I'm around for a lot longer, because I have my, I have my sons and I have my granddaughters, and my wonderful partner as well, and the charity, and so I need to look after myself as well.
When we don't love ourselves, or we've got low self-esteem, same thing. It's interesting how that can show up in someone's life, and self-harm is one of them. But I think that self-harm comes in many forms.
Absolutely.
One of those is the way in which we treat our bodies through diet. We can eat too much; it's a form of self-harm. We can eat not enough; that's a form of self-harm. We can actually do deliberate harm to our bodies. That's obviously
right.
Self-harm. But another thing I've seen as well is you see some athletes, ultra marathon runners, and all this sort of stuff, and sometimes they suffer with low self-esteem. And there was a study out. I don't have the resource on me to share it, but it was along the lines of, often it's people who have gone through some level of trauma in their lives that associate with the healing of that with the training they put themselves through. And it's the ultra this or the ultra that, and the Iron Man and the Iron Women and all this sort of stuff that end up, if you dig back into their past, they've typically gone through some level of trauma. Or they don't necessarily, for some of them, they're fighting this kind of inner demon around self-love, and they want to put themselves and their bodies through pain. It's a fascinating topic, really, isn't it? Why humans do what they do, and how a trauma which can stem back from childhood then influences the decisions you make subconsciously throughout your life.
Absolutely. It is, because I think when we talk about self-harm, people automatically think that you're cutting yourself, you're physically cutting yourself. Like, no. There are so many ways in which we can harm ourselves. So many ways.
Dangerous situations where you're more likely to be hurt.
Absolutely.
High-risk sports, for instance, or you could just be more of a risk taker when you're out socially, or there's drinking alcohol, there's drugs.
Yeah.
There's a long list of ways that people can hurt themselves and self-harm based on the trauma they've experienced.
That's right.
When you're working with parents, I'm assuming you work directly with parents as well, right?
Yes, we do, yes.
What would you say are the top 3 mistakes that parents make when it comes to bullying? What are parents doing wrong? I don't know. I'm not trying to criticize parents, but there's the stuff that we're always doing wrong, all right? So what would you say are the top 3 mistakes that parents are making that you help correct them with?
Like you said, I don't think parents do things wrong. I think it's because they don't know what to do. And so I think for me, the things that we try and sort of talk to parents about is if it's online bullying, they take the phone off the child.
Yeah.
And that then makes the child feel that they're being punished again for doing something wrong. And it's not it's not the child's fault. And and we know that young people in their phones today, although in some ways, yes, they are carrying a bully in their pocket, Of course they are. But by taking that phone off them, you're isolating them from the friends that they have as well, and from things that they might watch or follow, or, the positive things that they do on that phone. So that's one thing we say is don't just take that phone off them, because it isn't your child's fault.
Yeah.
And we've had parents as well that literally just storm into a school, ranting and raving and screaming at the poor receptionist, who's like, "Why are you here? I don't even know you. What are you doing?" And of course, there's a procedure to follow, and it is so frustrating for a parent. But unfortunately, there is a procedure to follow. And we've highlighted this procedure on our website, along with a brochure they can download. And we've even put templates of letters on there that if the school doesn't listen to you, because they say, "I'm going to the government." Well, you can, but the government won't listen to you unless you have followed the procedure. And it's awful, but they won't.
Yeah.
It is what it is. Otherwise, the governments would be inundated, wouldn't they, with parents banging on their door, and that can't happen. And so we talk to parents about what to do, and then we talk to parents about talking to their child as well, and how to have that conversation with the child. And the one thing is, never say to them, "Why do you think you're being bullied?" Because then they'll think, "Well, oh, so it is my fault."
Yeah.
Because you've just asked me, "Why am I being bullied?" So you're asking me for the reason why I'm being bullied. So it must be my fault that I'm being bullied, and it isn't that child's fault at all.
So really, really interesting. I totally agree with you. I think that a lot of the issues that parents experience it's a lack of understanding or knowledge, right?
Absolutely.
So it mostly becomes, it comes down to the fact that they're being reactive rather than proactive.
That's right, yeah.
So many things that parents can do to proactively prepare themselves and their children.
And you can't blame them, because it's an emotional issue. Your child is hurt and you want to make it better.
Yeah.
And you can't blame them for being reactive, because, of course, it does make a parent angry. It does. Their child is being hurt.
I agree that we can't blame a parent for being reactive and feeling reactive when their child goes through bullying. But I do think that we can encourage parents to be proactive.
They have to take a step back. Yes, they do.
Yeah. So that element, the proactive element, comes way before your child goes through bullying. The way I see bullying is this, right? We teach our children to cross the road, and we tell them to go up the road, to look left and right, look for cars, look for danger, where to cross the zebra crossing. Okay, all this sort of stuff. Try and get eye contact with the driver, all this sort of stuff, and then cross when it's safe. Yeah. But we don't approach bullying like that. But statistically, our child's likely to go through bullying. And as parents, we believe that our children, are not going to go through bullying. But the stats say they will. Your child is more of a chance of going through it than not. And this is where, of course, schools saying that we don't have bullying here then completely causes an issue to parents, because they're more likely to be less proactive, right? So when you understand that your child is likely to go through bullying, it's your responsibility as a parent to prepare for it. And so part of that is teaching your child to have confident body language, right? Confident nonverbal communication, so they don't appear as a victim. They don't appear vulnerable when they do go into situations. It's helping them grow their self-esteem and grow their confidence, so they're less likely to be picked on. It's teaching them to own and love the traits about themselves which do make them different.
That's right.
Understand about how unique they are and how that's valuable to them. It's enrolling them into environments where they're likely to grow and develop their emotional intelligence. Skills like leadership skills have such a massive impact on them.
Absolutely. That's right.
And it's teaching them about bullying and why it occurs and how to spot it. Because if they are, proactively themselves looking for bullying that's occurring with their friends or at school, then they're more likely to understand it themselves.
That's right.
Things you can do. One of the things that we find really helps with young kids is teaching them through storytelling.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating when we teach a child why bullying occurs. The first step of the 6 P's, we call it in Not a Victim, is perception. So we teach kids why bullying occurs. And we tell it through a story of a child who has a really tough time at home and they're being bullied by their big brother or whatever it is. And they end up going to school and they're upset and they're angry and they start picking on another kid near them because they're trying to get control back in their lives. And we ask the child that we're telling the story to, do you think that person is a bad person? And of course the answer is no. And, you know, it starts clicking for them that actually bullies aren't bad people. And so I think we can do an awful lot just by telling stories.
That's
and,
right.
you know, this all comes way before your child experiences bullying, right?
Absolutely. And we use stories in our workshops for younger children. And they're not about people, actually. They're about dogs who are displaying bullying behavior. And they're by a wonderful author called Claire Luther. And her books are absolutely amazing. And she writes about all sorts of different emotions and feelings. She has a complete range of books. And these particular ones that we use 3 of her books in our workshops. And they're all about dogs and different animals as well. But the children absolutely love them. And we can talk about the behavior, and then, you know, we say about how it can relate to children's behavior as well. Yeah. And there's lots of different questions that we ask. And then there's other activities. We use them in our Hand of Courage workshop as Jar of Confidence and our Kindness Matters workshops. And the children, they love the books, and we leave the books with the school for them to carry on the stories again and again and again, to just keep reminding the children and keep this memory, you know, again. Just keep bringing it up, keep reminding them when we're not there about this story and why it's so important, and why this message is so important as well, and how powerful it is. And you're right, stories are powerful, and parents can use these stories at home as well to talk to their children, because, you know, we don't know everything. You know, when this child is born, it doesn't come out with a rule book, it doesn't come out with a guidance or anything else. There it is, off you go, and you're like, oh my gosh, what do I do next? And you know, we have to navigate our way with this little human being and help it to understand absolutely everything. And then it goes to school and boom, there's bullying as well. You're thinking about the education side, and then there's bullying. And you're absolutely right. We do need to talk to them, because all we want is for our children to grow up to be a decent, kind, you know, human being. Of course, we want them to be successful and achieve their full potential. Of course we do. But we want them to be a decent, kind human being as well. Totally. And to be proud, you know, to be proud of who they are. And
if I was to ask a group of parents that, you know, the 3 traits that they were allowed to pass on to their kids, you know, this is their last day on earth, and they're allowed to pass 3 things on to their kids. The things that I think we would get back are things like courage, resilience, you know, emotional intelligence, love, you know, kindness, gratitude, these sorts of things. But we as parents, and the system in which our children grow up, places the majority of our attention and our care and our funds and our time on academic performance over soft skill development. Everything I mentioned there were values and soft skills, right? And yet we seem to place a disproportionate amount of energy and focus and money on education, academics. And so what's interesting to me is, if you look at a school, they're starting to do more soft skill development. They're starting to understand this and implement it, but it's so big, right? By the time schools actually make a change, it'll be 20 years, your kids will have kids by then.
That's right.
So one of the things I look at it as is, how do you measure a school's effectiveness? My sister's a teacher in the UK.
Yeah.
If she has she spends the whole year with a group of children, and in her class, she's got children who are suffering with depression, anxiety, separation at home, financial challenges, maybe a loss of a loved one, or chronic bullying, whatever it is. And she manages to mentor the entire class through all those difficult transitions, but they all get lower grades. Then at the end of the year, the school will say to her, you haven't performed well as a teacher. And you could say that's unfair, but then we also measure schools in the same way. Schools, especially private schools, are pinned against each other and competing for academic performance over soft skill development. And so it's one of those things that we're trying to disrupt with the Warrior Academy. The Warrior movement really is about providing an education that focuses on soft skill development that sits alongside academic education.
Yeah.
So we can't wait for schools to catch up. So we're doing it, and we're getting people to enroll with us.
Absolutely, because skills. They go hand in hand as well. Because you know, when I was at school, I was bright, and I was A/B student. With the bullying, I mean, they were O levels and CSEs when I was in school. With GCSEs, they were just terrible. You know, when somebody says to me, "How many GCSEs?" None. Look at my age. They weren't around then. But I left before I sat my final exams because I could not cope anymore. And I remember leaving for school one day and just thinking, I can't go through this anymore. I had attempted to take my own life as well. And clearly I'm still here. So, you know, that I attempted. And I just thought, I'm not doing this anymore. I can't go through what she's going to put me through anymore. And I turned and I ran all the way to my grandmother's house, which was probably, I don't know, about 12 miles away, 15 maybe. And I ran because I did run. Because I joke now about, you know, how do people run marathons and half marathons? I ran them regularly then, just not. Yes. But, and when I got there, I said, I can't do this anymore. I can't live there anymore. And I can't go to school anymore. And I went to live with her. And I was 16. And I found a job. And in fact, my human biology teacher, because they were all split, the sciences were all split then, he came looking for me at my place of work, begging me to go back to just do that one exam because I wanted to be a nurse. Wow. And I said, no, I'm living with my nan and I now have to, you know, contribute to the household.
What a great teacher, though. What a great teacher to come.
Amazing. Do you know what? He died earlier this year, late last year rather. And wow. I was devastated, even though he's obviously you're not older than me and that was going to happen. But it was like, my gosh, what an amazing man he was. Yeah, he was an amazing man. And I wanted to be a nurse. And you know, and it didn't happen. But you know, my older son became a surgeon. I mean, like I said, sadly we lost him nearly 2 years ago, but he became a surgeon. So I think I learned a lot through him. So but I went to live with my grandmother. And I stayed with her until I married. And but I also then felt guilty for leaving my mother because of what she was going through, and my younger sister. So you know, when you're going through something at home that people don't know about as well, and you're being bullied, all these emotions go through your head as well. But I didn't sit my formal exams, and then I felt stupid, useless. Because that impacts on you when you're looking for work as well. Yeah. So I did go back. I did go back and I resat my exams, just the basic ones, just to prove to myself that I could do them. Yeah. And then I went.
You know what? Do you know what makes me realize? If you develop someone's academics, you improve their academics, it has no impact on their character. But if you develop someone's character, it impacts their academics.
Yes.
So isn't it funny that we put 80% of the focus on academics and 20% on character?
Yeah.
We switch that around.
Exactly.
And I'm not saying necessarily we switch it around 80-20, but if we just place the higher focus on soft skills and character development, we taught kids how to handle pressure rather than bubble wrapping kids and protecting them from failure, giving everyone participation medals and stopping people from ever experiencing failure. So they lower their resilience. Instead, we worked with them to understand why pressure is good and how to handle it.
Absolutely.
So they're able to go into things like academics or a stressful situation or a demanding job and actually do a really great job of it and actually go through it and handle that pressure in a healthy way. And I think that's the differentiator between someone who experiences little success and someone who doesn't. It's someone who's develops their character, who has what we call a black belt character, right? Someone who has high levels of resilience and self-esteem and confidence and conduct and concentration, and can apply that into things like academics, lots of pressure. So it's a really fascinating topic there. One of the things I would say then, based on that, is it aligns with one of your biggest challenges. One of your biggest obstacles is finance. It's getting schools to pay to afford, to be able to roll this out into more and more schools and to work with more and more students, for charity funding to come in or government funding to come in. But if this was just a part of the national curriculum, and it was a part of the day-to-day, every day there was a 20-minute class about bullying, and it was a different module, understanding this element of it, and wouldn't that resolve some of the biggest issues that we face when it comes to mental health? We're almost trying to fix we spend all this money on fixing the symptom of it, right? It's like later on, a child then experiences depression, anxiety, high levels of stress, inability to handle pressure, all this sort of stuff, because of the trauma they've gone through as a youngster. But if we just change the focus and work with them here, from a government point of view, we would save an awful lot of money.
I know. And why don't they listen?
Well, we'll send them this podcast. And then,
honestly, absolutely. Because why aren't you listening? You're getting it all wrong. and it really, for you, honestly, we rampage around our office some days, absolutely rampage, because it's like, for goodness sake, can you just let us in and let us help these children and young people, help us work with these parents, please? And these parents have probably come back and go, yes, we're with you. Yeah. We know what you're talking about, because you're absolutely right. And there's a lot of pressure on young people today. There's a heck of a lot of pressure on young people. And I think sometimes as well that we are forgetting that not everybody is academic.
Yeah.
As well. Now, my second son, he was really creative. I mean, I would have said he was sort of your BC student, B/C. My older son was a surgeon. His grades are off the scale. And, extremely, extremely bright person. Extremely. As parents, we often used to say, oh, yeah, of course he follows his mother. Nah, he follows his father. Yeah. He didn't follow either of us. He was off the scale with he was very, very bright. And I can see his older daughter. I listen and look to her and think, oh, my goodness me, you're following your dad. But my second son, creative, he was on the stage in performing arts from the age of 14. He did his work at school and his exams because he knew he had to. And it was only because of an illness, and he spent 10 years in and out of hospital, that put an end to his life on the stage. But he was absolutely amazing. Did his school ever try and, really engage with that and really bring that on? No. No, they did not. No, they didn't. I mean, it was all right when he went on to college and university and stuff like that and did all of that. But no, they didn't. No, knuckle down. You need to get the same grades as your brother. The amount of times I went in and said, here's he. They are two different people. Yeah. He's not his brother. Stop going on about it. He's an individual, leave him alone to do what he wants to do, and stop comparing him to his brother, because you're wearing him out. You're knocking his self-confidence.
The biggest cause of the stress with siblings is later on is being compared to their siblings, right?
Absolutely.
And it stops them wanting to be unique initially. I think later on it actually fuels them wanting to be different, but initially it kind of prevents them from really showing who they are or their true colors, because they're constantly trying to be like each other or trying to be like the successful one, the smart one, the whatever it is you're being compared to, whichever attribute. So it's definitely something to be aware of as a parent, I think, not comparing and trying to encourage uniqueness within your child, because as soon as they love that about themselves, their resilience goes up.
Yes, exactly. And if we can't I used to say to the school, you can't keep attacking his confidence in this way by comparing him to his brother. He is an individual. He is very, very, he's amazing at what he does. You put his older brother on the stage and he'd freeze, absolutely freeze. Just like you put this one, in a hospital situation and he would freeze. Yeah. We're all very different and we're all very unique, and you're not recognizing everybody's uniqueness, and you have to do that. And I think that's the problem today. It's almost like academic. Well, what about the creative people? We're all unique and we're all very different, and they need to recognize that. And I'm very sorry if, by recognizing creative people, that you're not going to get your tick boxes on your academic tables. Well, it's the people that count. It's the young people that count, and getting them through this already challenging life is what we need to do, and letting them achieve their full potential. And I think their full potential, not the school's full potential.
Totally. And I think that one of the that's actually a really great point to end on, because there's a great quote by Albert Einstein, which you might know, and you probably know what I'm talking about. Everyone is a genius. Everybody's a genius. Yeah. If you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing that it's stupid.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So why are they not listening?
And so what we need to do as parents is focus on how we can inspire our kids to see what makes them different and to love that about themselves. And if they do, their resilience increases, they're less likely to go through bullying. And if they do go through bullying, they'll transition through it faster.
Absolutely.
Linda, really fascinating conversation. I love the work you're doing. If there's anything I can do to be a part of it, or you need more support, let me know. I'd love for us as the Warrior Academy to help support you as well. So
that would be amazing. Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.
I really hope you enjoyed today's Warrior Academy podcast episode. We're going to keep creating these episodes because I know that so many parents find them useful, or get insights or get ideas about how to develop their child's character. But it all comes down to the 3 C's: confidence, conduct, and concentration. So if you want to get a deep insight into the levels of confidence your child has, the level of concentration they have, or the level of conduct they have, so that you can actually put a score next to it and then work towards increasing those scores like we do in the Warrior Academy, then I'd love to invite you to fill in the Breakthrough Area Assessment. It takes about 5 minutes of your time, and you will get a personalized PDF report on your child's 3 C's. To access the Breakthrough Area Assessment and find out your child's 3 C's score, all you need to do is go to www.breakthrougharea.com.